Author and educational reformist William Bennett has had quite a career.
And then I became Secretary of Education in the United States, which was a wonderful job. Ronald Reagan said, I can't abolish this department, but maybe you could try to make some sense out of it and talk about what we need to do in education. So I said, I'll try. My wife, who is a elementary school and special education teacher, said, don't do your job by everybody else, like everybody else does. Find out what you're talking about first. And I said, well, why should I be different? And she said, because you're the Secretary of Education, do your homework. And I said, well, what would you have me do? And she said, go teach, go to school, teach classes, show your respect for teaching and for students and teachers and their parents. And I said, Elaine, I am the Secretary of Education of the United States. I don't do retail, I do wholesale. And she, the daughter of a vice president for commercial credit in Baltimore a lot of the time, said, do good retail and you'll do better wholesale. So I went around the country teaching class, and it was the best piece of advice I got.
Join me, Dr. Gail Gross, as I find out how William Bennett's experiences led him to found K-12, a unique program that combines online technology with traditional content.
What's interesting about education, and here again a good analog with medicine, is we know a lot. We actually know what makes for good education. And you've heard story after story, maybe even from me once or twice, about kids who've been educated in math and science, even though they come from desperate circumstances, inner city neighborhoods, bad disadvantage. Nevertheless, they're educated by the brilliant teachers, the heroes, the Jaime Escalanes of Garfield High School in Los Angeles, or Joe Clark, remember, with the white suit and the bullhorn in New Jersey. There are these heroes. We have proven that if you get kids with the right teachers and the right material, you can educate virtually any child in America. Yet the numbers show that we are not doing that. So the big question for policy, and it's a huge question with an industry that is $720 billion, is what to do. I have been trying to shake up the establishment, the teachers' unions, and the bureaucracy for years. Other people have too. And we now see at last, I think, some encouraging signs on the horizon.
Find out more about his new book on September 11th, Why We Fight.
We are a diminished country today compared to where we were last Tuesday. We are less than who we were because we have lost some of our heart, some of our people. We are diminished by their loss. But I have to tell you at the same time, I think in some ways we are a better country than we were 6 days ago. We are thinking about more important things. We are focused.
I'm Dr. Gail Gross. I'm delighted you could join me today. My guest is William Bennett. During the 1980s, Bill Bennett emerged as one of the nation's most prominent political figures. He served under President Reagan as chair of the National Endowment for the Humanities, Secretary of Education, and was President Bush's drug czar. Time magazine named him one of the 25 most influential people in America. Modern Maturity magazine called him the most influential man in America today. Well, today he is one of the country's most important and respected voices on cultural, political, and education issues. He has written 10 books. His latest is Why We Fight, Moral Clarity and the War on Terrorism. Welcome.
Thank you.
This is an honor for me, and I'm just thrilled to have you speak on these issues that are so prominent in our culture today.
Thank you very much.
Would you start with the war on drugs? It's getting so much press, people on either side of the aisle, some saying we should legalize drugs, some saying the war is failing. What do you say?
Well, the war hasn't been waged in the last few years. I hope President Bush will take the issue up and seriously. It looks like he will. He's pretty serious about what's going on in Colombia. He's appointed an excellent man to be drug czar, John Walters, I should say. I guess, full disclosure, John was my deputy, my chief of staff. I know him well. Look, there's a lot you can do about the drug problem, and this country did it. From 1985 to 1991, drug use went down by 60%. Cocaine use went down by 70%. That's success. If you had had the same kind of results with teenage pregnancy or high school dropouts, 60, 70% improvement, you'd be celebrating. Instead, you get that record, and then people say, well, let's legalize because we can't do anything. We can do something. Now, things turned the wrong way in end of 1991, 1992, and through the 90s, things got worse again because we took our eye off the ball. We stopped pressing the case. We stopped going after the drug cartels, and we really didn't do much of a job in education. A lot of those ads that used to be on TV, the 2 fried eggs in the pan, this is your brain on drugs, or somebody jumping off the diving board into an empty swimming pool, we didn't see as many of those ads, and there wasn't the funding from the private sector for that. So we lost our attention, or at least had a gap in our attention, and so drug use went back up. But there's a lot we can do, and interestingly, young people are asking us to do more. If you survey young people, they will identify the drug issue as one of the things that bothers them the most and that they think we should do something about. They're asking us, the adults, to help them. We should help them.
And what would you do?
Well,
what is your idea, your prescription for this drug problem when we seem to be living in a drug culture? You know, we have prescription drugs for almost everything. We wake up, we have a cup of coffee,
right.
We go to a dinner party. I don't, but many people have alcohol. You know, we seem to take an aspirin for a headache,
right.
Ritalin for ADD.
Well, one thing I would not do is try to confuse the issue of legal drugs or misuse of legal drugs with the problem of illegal substances or controlled substances. There are some things we can talk about in general in regard to drug use, tranquilizers, for example, and the growth of tranquilizers. But I wouldn't want to get into, let's talk about aspirin, and now let's talk about cocaine, because I think the way one approaches it is going to be different. The controlled substances, which is what the drug czar, or director of drug control policy, has to deal with, is a special set of entities and issues, and I think there is a lot you can do. We showed what to do in the late 80s, and you do it again. You attack the supply, you raise the price, you lower the purity. Look, since 9/11, we've had more people at the border, checking at the border, and in the early days after 9/11, a lot more drugs were seized than before. So that tells you something about one thing to do. But the main job here is to educate children in a very direct and forceful way about drug use, and for schools and families to have clear no drug use policies. The main thing I find myself saying, though, is to counsel against despair, counsel against this notion that you can't do anything. You can do something. I'm co-chairman of the Partnership for Drug-Free America with Mario Cuomo, and one of the messages that we've been putting out lately is that, you know, parents are the anti-drug. Parents are really critical players here. Kids will listen to their parents on this issue for the most part, even if they look like they're not listening. So parents need to do that job.
It's such a wonderful point that you make. Parents need to take the lead. Parents need to parent.
That's right.
The other wonderful thing that you're doing is this crossing party lines. You really have elicited Cuomo in this participation, and he's so willingly involved.
Well, as I joke, I say this is some measure of my commitment that I'm working with Mario Cuomo, and also a measure of his commitment that he's willing to work with me.
Exactly.
So fair enough, that's right.
That's wonderful.
Right.
What about the movie Traffic? That showed us about drugs, and the idea that what you're saying is we have to go to the source, the pusher, the grower.
Well, partly good movie, partly ridiculous movie. It was good in that it showed the heroism of law enforcement officers. It was good and accurate in that the tour that Michael Douglas did was the tour I did as the first drug czar, so that part was accurate. But ridiculous in its conclusions, that there's nothing we can do, or we have to throw up our hands. As I said, the numbers from 1985, 1991 show what we can do and what we did do. You know, you get public opinion going in the right direction, and get authority to express that opinion, as we did. I worked with a Democrat Congress. I was working for a Republican president. I worked with a Democrat Congress. We fashioned a strategy, and it worked. The numbers went down. Look, you're never going to get rid of all drugs in this society, and the question of dependence on legal drugs is another large and thorny issue, but you can keep the numbers from growing, and you can send a clear message to young people, and I hope they'll get on it.
Education is the key.
Education is one of the keys, but when it comes to illegal drugs, law enforcement is a very important key. When our folks get out of prison after serving time, we know that they will not get back into the drugs that sent them into prison if those drugs aren't readily available. But if they're all over the street, those people are doomed.
Exactly. Then, and we're moving forward into the education in general of our children.
Right.
And we have this new bill that's come out. What is your feeling on this bill?
Pretty good bill. I give it a B-. I'm an honest grader. A for effort. That is the president, or at least A for attention. The president gave the education issue a lot of attention. Obviously, it was very good for him and good for the Republican Party. The final result was not so good. There are some measures for accountability in the bills. Testing. We will test students, which is a good idea. But the bill lacks flexibility. That is, I think you should give the states and local authorities much more flexibility to educate children the way they think they should. And no choice. There's no choice in this bill, or very little choice. And that's very, very important. I think parents should have maximum choice and flexibility in the education of their children. Or I should put it this way, poor people should have the same opportunities to send their children to good schools as wealthy people do. If they do not, I do not think you have something called equal educational opportunity. This isn't a political issue. This is basically a civil rights issue. I think every child has a right to be educated in this country. We spent $500 billion. We ought to get the job done. But kids who go to lousy schools don't get that education, and that's not right and that's not fair.
So you feel that choice is really about morals and civil rights, not really a political issue.
It'll become a political issue as you get into legislation, become a legal issue as the lawyers get into it. But I think it's a fundamental civil right, and a number of black leaders in this country and Latino leaders have said it is the next civil rights battle for their constituents, to give their kids the same chance at a good education that wealthy kids have. When President Clinton came to Washington, he had his choice of enrolling his daughter at any public school in the district, any public school. I say this not to criticize President Clinton at all, but just to make this larger point. They said no, they wanted Chelsea to go to a private school. Well, that's fine, that's their choice. When I discussed this with the President's Secretary of Education, he said, well, you have to remember that the President's daughter is a very special child. Well, indeed she is, but indeed they are all special children. And if the President made that choice, shouldn't other people be given, within our means, within our capabilities, the same choice? We know that a good school can make an enormous difference in the life of a child. How can we hold back that opportunity from a child simply because she's poor?
And you say the enemy of the public school is the public school itself.
Well, the bureaucracy, or what I've called in other times the blob, this great mess of rules and bureaucracy and procedures and licensing requirements and other things. Public schools have driven a lot of people out of their own domain. There are wonderful people in the public schools. There are great and dedicated teachers, but it's like a lottery. You may be lucky and go to a good one, and there are some good ones within miles of where we sit today, and there are some terrible ones. But education shouldn't be a lottery. It should be virtually a guarantee in this country. Look, 63% of African American children in this country cannot, in the 4th grade, cannot read at a basic level. Cannot read at a basic level. That is a scandal. Well, people say, what can you do about it? Teach them how to read. We know how to teach kids how to read, but in some schools they're not doing it.
Explain to me what is a virtual school.
A virtual school is a school that exists but not in bricks and mortar. I'm chairman of a company called K-12. It's one of the virtual schools that's around. We deliver all our programs over the internet, every lesson every day for 12 years eventually, in math, English, history, science, art, and music. What's the reason for that? One reason is you have a teacher shortage in virtually every county district in this country in some subject or other. There are districts in this country where there aren't able teachers in many disciplines. You can use the technology today in a way that you can give every child in this country access to an excellent education by virtue of the internet. So the first thing we did was hire bunches of teachers, excellent teachers, and said, how do you do it? And we watched how they did it, and then we used the technology to leverage their qualities, to get their great teaching and qualities to every child who wants to sign up. A number of states have said it's okay in our state to have a virtual charter school, so the child enrolls, gets instruction online, does most of her work or his work offline, reading books, doing the usual stuff, takes a test, so the state is sure that it's getting its money's worth, and if the results are good, states will continue. Look, I think we should try anything that works, and if it works, I think we should reward it. If it doesn't work, don't reward it.
Now that's a point I really love. The idea that there are so many ways to educate a child, and we're stuck in an old way that was really a past way that filled a gap, a need in another time, and now here we are in a modern time still retreating back to the past.
You know, one thing I learned from special education, which is an area of my wife's expertise, is something called the IEP, the Individualized Education Program.
Exactly.
And in special education, we design a curriculum that'll work for that child. Well, ideally, you can design a curriculum that works for every child. And by the way, the technology can be very helpful here. Because if you're doing your program with an internet-based program, internet-based instructional system, you can move as quickly as your mind can move through different subjects. And you may go faster on some and slower than others. You may whiz through on the math, but you need to go a little slower on the history. And you can develop with a parent or other responsible adult your own individualized program. And that's what we should be thinking of. Look, I think we should redefine public education. Public education is not government-owned schools. Public education is the education of the public, wherever and however it occurs. And if a child who is a member of the public is getting educated, we should pay for it. If they are not being educated, I don't think we should pay for it.
So the idea that there are many ways to solve a problem, we're teaching children how to think in many different ways, divergent thinking, and we're creating education models that meet that concept.
That's right. And if we're doing that, shouldn't the parent be involved, since the parents often do have a sense of their children? So yes, I interrupted you.
No, because I was just going to tell you that I read your curriculum for the K-12, and I was amazed at how beautifully it was written. My doctorate enters curriculum and instruction, and you went level by level by level, creating a curriculum that really had many options and opportunities for children. My question is, how do parents get this program? Obviously, they get it over the internet, also in collaboration with the state they live. But can they do it in conjunction with their school program, or is it an either-or?
Well, we hope they'll be able to do it in conjunction with the school program, but that's up to the school. We would be delighted, very happy if people wanted to use this in the school system. We're working with one major urban school district suggesting that K-12 be the 604th public school in that system. Someone may guess which one it is by my description, but we'd be delighted. But that's really up to them. We are like an educational supplier. We're like a book publisher, and we can produce the best materials possible, but whether the school decides to take us in or not is up to them. We hope so. We are hospitable and friendly toward this idea. By the way, with our system, you end up hiring more teachers, not fewer, because kids who were previously out of the system have come back into the system because of the attractiveness of our program.
You know, David Elkind, who wrote The Hurried Child, The Miseducation of American Child, I've never met him, but he owes me a lot of money. I recommend his books all the time. And he says that we're always looking to other countries for the answer. We look for the German model, but that's really our model.
Right.
We look for the Japanese model. In a sense, we created that also. What we should be looking towards is an American model, which is based on our character of the rugged individual and family values.
We've been driven a lot by trends in American education. We have forgotten that some things are true over time. You know, it's as if you practiced medicine by removing the heart from the left side or right side and alternate ears. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. When you learn how to teach reading, stay with it. You know, you don't have to try something new just because it's new. I realized when I was Secretary of Education that people were using the word innovative as if it meant good and traditional as if it meant bad. Well, a thing isn't good just because it's new, and it's not bad just because it's old. It's good if it's good, and it's bad if it's bad. So you want to be open to new ideas, but what works, works. And we do know a lot about what works. So yes, some consistency and some pride in the development of our own system. We really have performed some educational miracles in this country that other countries don't understand. Take the individualized education program. Special education is a unique American invention. They don't do that in Japan. And many children with very serious learning problems come to the United States for help because that's where we understand the individual.
And of course, when we compare ourselves to these other systems, it's apples and oranges because we educate everybody and they only educate, in a sense, the elite child.
At a certain point, that's true.
They track them, I guess.
Yes, but in the early grades, we can measure differences, and very early on, we do pretty well. As we progress in school, our kids do fall behind. If you take the apples and the apples, the American apples, the Japanese apples, and the German apples, our apples are pretty ripe and pretty good early on, but as they go on in school, they learn less compared to kids from other industrialized nations.
Yet when we enter the university system, which then gets into a sense of privatization,
that's right.
That's when we excel once again.
Well, isn't that interesting? See, we have competition in our higher education. You can use tax dollars at private universities or public universities, and lo and behold, we have the best higher education system in the world. We are the place where everybody goes to university.
So, what brought you here? How did this evolution take place?
My professional career?
Yes.
Well, I tell people I was, a lowly professor of the humanities when Ronald Reagan was elected, and that's what started it all. And he needed a chairman of the National Endowment for the Humanities, and they told him he had to have a professor of the humanities do it. So as I half-joke to people, I said there were, at that point, 3 people in the United States who were teaching humanities who had voted for Ronald Reagan. And I was one of them, and I was the second choice, so I got the job. I went into the humanities, and then I became Secretary of Education, and then from there on to other jobs. But it's been a wonderful, wonderful ride.
And in your own life history, what do you think brought you to a place where you were willing to so put yourself on the line and really speak your mind regardless of popularity, regardless of the trends of our time?
Well, we were taught at home always to speak our minds. I guess not so much by admonition, but by example. Everybody in my family spoke his or her mind. My brother is well known for speaking his. I'm well known for speaking mine. But you had to speak your mind, or you wouldn't get a chance to talk in my family. So I think that had something to do with it. I think football probably had something to do with it too, because people say, "Are you bothered by the criticism?" And I explained to them that I was a tackle in football, and if I don't get hit in the head 5 or 6 times a day, it's not a normal day for me, so it's perfectly fine.
And the idea of the understanding of morals, that the moral concept given to a child early on creates a good citizen later on.
That was just so deeply embedded in us, I think, from my mother, my grandmother. My parents were divorced, so it was a mother-grandmother who raised my brother and me, but that was so deeply embedded, such a constant message. And then Catholic education made this a very strong message. By the way, public education ought to make that a strong message too, but this is one of the ways public education has hurt itself, by abandoning the field of moral education. On grounds, some people say, and I think mistakenly, that kids come from so many different groups and religions that they can't really talk about morals. They can talk about morals. They can talk about the ones that we all share.
When we were children, there were classes called civics,
right,
or citizenship,
right.
And actually, from the first grade on, we were taught about respecting other people's boundaries, territories, the law.
That's right. We were also taught about our country. And how we should love it and defend it. And one of the interesting things since 9/11 is stuff I'm picking up. I'm getting a lot of this from looking at what's going on in the schools. A lot of young people do not know why we fight, do not know why we are defending what we're defending. There's a lot of relativism out there, the notion that this country is just one country among many, nothing special or unique about it. That's a terrible disservice to young people.
And you just recently got involved with talking about these issues actually relative to 9/11. Tell us some of your feelings, some of the changes that you see that not only have suddenly happened, but are going to happen as a result of an attack on our shores.
I suppose one that may be of particular interest, which is right on us, immediate and direct, is we're apparently going to have a baby boom in June and July because of September 11th. There was a lot of talk of families being closer together, and that's one way of being closer together. It is interesting. It was a time when families came together, and people believed that they should be closer as families. And one way people deal with death and catastrophe is to talk about renewing life. So it's no surprise that we'll see a baby boom this summer. Second, I think there's more consciousness of the fragility of life. I was talking to some people in the life insurance business who told me that millions of Americans are anteing up their life insurance. Homemakers, providers want to be sure that their families are covered and well taken care of. More than that, I think, remains to be seen, Gail. We don't know what the final, I think, outcome will be in terms of how we think about our country. But the bubble was burst. The bubble of the 90s was burst, and we're in new time and new water. We'll see. But the implications, it seems to me, for education are both large and clear. A lot of our young people did not know the basics when it came to 9/11. There was stuff in the air about, should we fight? Is it right to fight? If we just, are violent in response to their violence, does that make us as bad as they are? Why do they hate us? Woeful ignorance about not just Islam and Muslim, the Muslim faith and Arab countries, but ignorance about our own traditions and our own principles.
What should we be doing?
Teaching, and teaching by example. But we've developed a K-12 curriculum that's very focused on American history, not social studies. We don't call it social studies. We call it history. We have history and we have geography. I know what they are, and we're very proud of that. So our children will know what it is we are about. I think that's a very important thing. Hold your children close. Explain to them what happened. Explain to them why it is that people hate us, not for our weaknesses, but for our strengths, and then introduce them to history so they'll know what those strengths are.
Those are brilliant points. I hate to end this, but we're out of time. I want to ask you one important question. What was the defining moment in your life?
I think the defining moment in my adult life was my marriage to Elaine Glover, now Elaine Glover Bennett. It made me a whole person in ways I hadn't been before. I'd been, a good student, and I'd been a reader, and I was pretty productive. But that was the beginning of becoming a whole human being.
That's a wonderful, wonderful defining moment. I thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
I'm going to end with a quote that I read that you often speak of. Teddy Roosevelt said, "To educate a person in mind and not in morals is to educate a menace to society." William Bennett, you have managed to do both. Thank you for joining me. I'm Dr. Gail Gross. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks a lot.
So much.
You bet.